Good evening and welcome to reading number 378 of the It's About Time Writers Reading Series. We have a fantastic lineup tonight, people reuniting throughout the city and in their little Zoom boxes. We're going to be welcoming Allison Green and Sylvia Byrne Pollack. I've also just recently learned that Sylvia, which I'll read in her, is nominated for an Aspiring Senior Award by Sound Generations, which I think is wonderful, but I have another friend who's been nominated who's the same age as me. So tonight we have two open mic people so far, Carol Holding and Brett Bowman, I believe last name. So Brett Bowman, if you want to do a 3-minute reading, just let me know. This reading is being recorded. The library, after it's recorded, we will be excerpting it by reader depending on who wants to participate, and also any names that are showing. The librarians who have their wonderful genius ways will erase any names so that privacy will be maintained for all of our attendees. I don't think I have any other notes for you tonight. Just welcome to a beautiful evening in May 13th, and let's just jump right in there. I'm now going to go to Carol Holding for our first open mic tonight, followed by Brett. So if Carol is ready to, yes, she's unmuted. Okay. Carol Holding, 3-minute open mic.
Thanks, Peggy. Wonderful reading, Lily. I'm completely intimidated. This is also the start of a book of my novel, which I have read. I think this is a third version for this group, so I appreciate your patience. The book will be called something around the Great Recession, a love story. December 18th, 2008. Lunch at the Harvard Business School's executive dining room on the middle floor of a 3-story brick structure built around a courtyard. The room is nearly empty, Christmas break, and smells of fresh dinner rolls and moldering plasterboard. We are 4 for lunch, me plus David Melnick, my would-be partner if we get the project, Julia Jordan, the chic, middle-aged African-American who runs our alumni office, and a young woman whose name I missed. As we walk towards our table, I comment on the blackbirds floating in and out of the windows, that they look like an exhibit in a natural history museum. David hasn't briefed me on the scheme we're there to discuss. I am there to sell myself to Julia Jordan. David is close to Julia, though not to the 20-something subordinate she brought along. This is Junior's first visit to the inner sanctum of capitalism, and David's too, and they are impressed, despite its unremarkable architecture and furniture. We're seated at a window. I'm facing it. Julia Jordan takes a breadstick, freeing me to do the same. I ask if I can take notes, but she said she'd prefer that I not. Let's just get to know each other, she says, looking pointedly at Junior. She and David begin talking about a volunteer project at the New York Alumni Club. A clump of birds breaks off and then disappears, and the rest follow. Then they reappear, this time in loose formation, as if they're an art installation, aviary forms connected by loose wires. I turn my attention back to the meeting. David's voice has dropped to an intimate purring. He with his trustworthy veneer, a solid square face and thick blonde curls, and Julia, smiling snugly, are huddled together so that neither I nor the junior client can hear what they're saying. She's a newly minted career woman in a cheap black suit, a girl on the go. She looks at me impatiently. David and Julia turn towards me in tandem. David says, Elizabeth's work focuses on environmental branding, but as you saw from the conference, she's also an expert in nonprofits, just consulted on the 9/11 memorial. I smile and nod at Julia. I finished that project 3 years ago, but I need this business badly. I'll be whatever he wants to sell me as. Nobody has paying work. It's the depths of the Great Recession. Like most of New York, I'm desperate. Our lunches arrive. The birds are back to flying across the courtyard in formation, now and then flashing me with their white bellies. I smile at their limited repertoire and take a bite of my poached salmon, and then the birds are gone. David and Julia are speaking in formal business tones. The junior client asks what she thinks are smart, deep questions. God save me from the young and ambitious. In a flash, the window fills with a body of birds, all tilted in unison so their white tummies glitter in the sun. I can hear them through the glass, the sound of wings flapping and insistent murmuring. They're flying much faster now, swooping across the yard in a single movement, then turning on their backs, white chest to the sky in synchronized waves as they slow, then dive out of sight. I wait transfixed for their next move. Nothing, nothing. And then they fly straight up again, this time so close to the window, I clap my hands. It's involuntary, but it is also very rude. Sorry, I say meekly. Those birds are amazing. The three of them stare at me, horrified. Elizabeth? David is embarrassed. Julia Jordan says, ah, yes, the birds. They leave a mess in the courtyard, but we can't get rid of them. There is a time is money edge to her voice. Because for all of us then, everything's about money. And that's becoming a problem for me.
Thank you, Carol.
Thank you for allowing me to read.
I'm glad to see you again. Okay. Brett.
Okay. This is called Wild Horse Lookout. June. A red Willys Jeep sputtering, spewing visitors in manicured clothing, trampling up the rickety steps. I count each one until they tumble into my isolation, babbling nervous conversation as if it were a gift, blinking at wide sun-lanced landscape and arched azure sky, till finally, shyly, inevitably, don't you ever get lonely up here? Pretending sagacity, I answer, no, not really. July, bursting from my glass-walled cocoon to run the roads and eat wild berries, gathering foxglove, iris, and columbine, walking with night hawks overhead, circling and circling. Cougar watches with slit-eyed anger from his whitened spruce snag perch. August, the final blood-red pangs of dying sun. Bull elk horns slit up like bone-white beacons. I sleep with a battalion of comrades. Cassiopeia, Orion, Buddhist, Scorpio, Aries, cool and aloof, their busy comings and goings across the zenith. September, summer's finale. Winter rains brooding on the darkened horizon. Chiquita, a yellow Chevy, loaded down, ready. We three rumble downwards towards city lights. Cat digging claws in Angora shoulders. Dog scanning for last glimpses of doe and bull. Our mutual trepidation and avidity for civilization. A small trail of dust rises up in the empty road behind us. I got one more I can do, I think. Affliction of addiction, predilection, or my dark tail. Swish, swish the sound it makes as I walk across the floor. Thump, thud, it hits the pane as I'm moving through the door. What is that, I ask, that stays so close behind that no matter where I look, I cannot seem to find? It's part of me, I realize, as I wrap it around my chest. I squeeze it ever tighter as it curls around my breast. I see the pointed tip of it now close up to my face. I wonder if this means that I'm no longer of the human race. It binds my arms so close and holds them rigid as with fear. It grabs my loved ones also, and anyone who dares come near. Too late to pull away. It eats awareness from my head. It cinches tight around us both and leaves us both for dead. But this time we've effected a close and harrowing escape, our bodies covered with the scars where the scales did roughly scrape. But the vision of its clutching coils still strikes terror in my heart. It makes the air seem sweeter and life seem more like art. But when I walk across the floor, I listen for the sound of my dark tail being dragged behind and beginning to curl around. That's it.
Thank you, Brett. It's nice to meet you. Come back and join us anytime. So Now I'm moving on, and if you're just joining us, this is reading number 378 at the It's About Time Writers Reading Series. We're now going to be hearing from Allison Green. So go ahead and unmute. Allison Green's first book, the novel Half Moon Scar, was published by St. Martin's Press as part of its Stonewall Inn Editions imprint. Ooligan, I love saying that, may not even be saying it right, Press at Portland State University published her memoir, The Ghosts Who Travel With Me, which I have in the other room. Her essays, stories, and poems have appeared in publications such as the Gettysburg Review, Ziza, Kalex, Willow Springs, Raven Chronicles, and Yes Magazine. She is working on a novel about the Mount St. Helens eruption, and as I've let her know personally, I've never forgotten her reading with the assistance of Jennifer D. Monroe about the Equal Rights Amendment. Welcome, Allison.
Thank you. Thank you, Peggy, and thanks all of you. And I have never read over Zoom. I've taught over Zoom, but never read, so I hope this goes all right. I had planned to read from my manuscript about Mount St. Helens eruption, but my father died a week ago, and I wanted to read from my memoir a couple of pieces about him. And I think I've practiced enough, I think I can get through them. So this is my memoir, The Ghosts Who Travel With Me. And so I'll just read 3 short pieces from the book, and after this one I'll explain a little more about how the book works. So this chapter is called On the Road in 1963. My parents were in graduate school in Ohio when I was born. Actually, my father was in graduate school, and my mother had decided not to go back after her first year, now that she had this wiggly, complaining thing that was me. She ate a lot of cucumbers that summer I was born. Maybe gas explained my wiggling. In August, my dad waved goodbye to my mother and 2-month-old me as he drove away with a friend in a '49 Ford, Washington or bus sign across the back. He was one of the 300,000 people listening to Martin Luther King Jr. give the speech that would become the most famous in US history. According to the newspapers, there's a lot of things high school students don't know, but the I Have a Dream speech is one they do. I have heard this story many, many times. I hold it like a lucky stone in my pocket, a talisman against indifference. In 1987, I went to my own March on Washington, this time with 500,000 people who were here, queer and fabulous, get used to it. Marching for rights with that many people like yourself feels like 4th of July fireworks and New Year's Eve champagne all in one holiday. Recently, my parents told me a story I hadn't heard before. A couple of weeks after my father returned to Ohio and told my mother what had happened on the mall in Washington, they got into the '49 Ford and drove to Alabama. They had never been to the South. My mother's sister was living in Montgomery with my uncle, who worked at the Air Force Base. In Birmingham, they stopped for lunch at a diner. The diner's radio was broadcasting the story of a bombing of a Baptist church right there in Birmingham just a couple of hours before. 4 Black Sunday school girls had been killed. I heard about this event, which would come to epitomize the cruelty of racist Southerners as I grew up, but I didn't realize how close I had been in space and time to the devastated church. In the diner, my dad looked out the window at the '49 Ford with the out-of-state plates. He looked at himself and his wife and his baby. Southern whites were sometimes suspicious of whites from out of state, assuming they were there to agitate for the rights of Blacks. "We're not eating here," he said, and he hustled my mom out of the diner and back into the car, and they were on the road, hungry and sweating. These intersections of the historic and the mundane, a racist bombing and a stop for lunch, a diaper change in Ohio and a march in Washington, are they significant? Does it matter how close I came to hearing King's words myself? Does it matter that I was born in 1963? I think it does. I think it matters more than almost anything. So this is a book, it started with writing about my adolescent obsession with the writer Richard Brautigan, who's famous for a book, well, many books, but Trout Fishing in America was one of his famous books. And in that book was based on a trip that he and his wife took through Idaho in the early 60s. And my paternal grandparents are from Idaho. So my spouse Arlene and I followed in Brautigan's footsteps through Idaho. And so the memoir became a book about literal and literary ancestry. And with an emphasis on this idea of what does it mean to be born in a time and a place, in a body. So those are the things I'm exploring. So I'm going to read another short passage, chapter called On the Lam in Newport, Washington. My favorite Beatle was George, the quiet, soulful one. I wanted to marry him, but he was already married to a waifish blonde. Later, singers like Joni Mitchell showed me that I could be a musician, not just marry one. But musicians were not the only women in popular culture to capture my attention. One woman's image was all over our black and white televisions in the mid-70s. She was out there in America somewhere, and she was very dangerous. We bought groceries in the small town of Newport when we stayed at my grandparents' cabin in eastern Washington. The trip to Newport was an afternoon's entertainment when we felt like going somewhere. One day, I exchanged my swimsuit for a sherbet orange top and shorts sewn by my grandmother and worked my toes into rubber thongs for a trip to Newport with my dad. We went to the Paperback book exchange where I traded Agatha Christie's 2 for 1. We ate lunch at the diner we always called No Shoes, No Schritz, after the misspelling that had been posted on the door one year. While we ate our grilled cheese, we wrote funny postcards to my dad's parents. After lunch, we went to the post office. Wanted signs hung on a bulletin board, scruffy-looking men who'd killed police and robbed banks. And there was the woman, Patty Hearst. The picture of Patty Hearst in my head was the one at the bank where she wore a trench coat and hefted a machine gun, Patty Hearst the terrorist. But in the picture on the wanted poster, she smiled, the newspaper heiress. The news stories that tracked her movements told a strangely compelling story, culpable but not, dangerous but only if pushed. I said, Patty Hearst wouldn't be in Newport. Why do they have signs for her in the Newport post office? My dad licked stamps and stuck them to the postcards. Newport is exactly the kind of place Patty Hearst might be. And maybe she was. Maybe I'd seen her buying a pound of Brock's candy at the Safeway, or paging through And Then There Were None at the book exchange. Must be boring on the lam sometimes. We mailed the postcards, got into the Valiant, and drove through town. Patty Hearst was sitting in the window of No Shoes, No Schritz, drinking coffee over last week's Newport Gazette. So this is, I'm going to read another short chapter. My father was an anthropologist who taught at the University of Washington, and they called him Dr. Death because he taught a very popular course on death and dying. So this chapter talks about that. On cool summer mornings, I would sit on a stool in my paternal grandmother's kitchen and eat stewed plums while she made pancake rabbits. In the afternoons, she played nursery rhymes on a baby grand piano, and my grandfather recorded me on his reel-to-reel singing along. When I was a teenager, my grandmother took me to the opera, and for my high school graduation, we went to a season of plays, The School for Wives, Antigone, and The Rose Tattoo. The Idaho farm girl had been eclipsed by the Seattle Opera Guild member and Ikebana Club president. She and my grandfather traveled to Europe, Mexico, and Japan. She collected dozens of silver bracelets, and they jangled against each other up and down her arms. It used to be that when Arlene joked that I was from Idaho, she wanted me to acknowledge my Idaho heritage, by which she meant not the baby grand piano and the tales of Hoffman, but the dusty ranch where my grandmother grew up, and the mining claims that my grandfather fruitlessly searched with his father and brothers. But now that we have spent some time in the state, her words have a different meaning. To be from Idaho is to be from the lakes of Stanley Basin, the leafy trees of Boise, the sweet, quiet winds over the Cambridge Prairie. It's to be from the hipped-up modern hotel with its mid-century swagger, from the restaurants of the Basque Block, from the long, cool Boise River. I carry my grandmother's home as I carry her bones, the shape of her body, the early silver gray of her hair. In her casket, she wore the bracelets, but before she was buried, they were slipped into a blue felt pouch and given to me. Every time I wear them, I feel the weight of that ancestry. The same year Arlene and I went to Idaho, my father's book, Beyond the Good Death, The Anthropology of Modern Dying, was published. After we returned from our trip, I sat down and read it. My mind flickered with images from the trip, and my body still carried the rhythm of travel. Something important had happened to me in Idaho, but I couldn't articulate what it was. In the book, my father wrote about our tendency in the United States, unlike in some other parts of the world, to segregate the sacred from the mundane. We think of the spiritual plane as beyond us, up there in the sky, or even farther, out there in the universe. This is true for those with a more traditional view of heaven, and for those who sense a diffuse cosmic connection, but don't call it God. However, according to scholar Robert A. Orsi, and here I'm paraphrasing my father's paraphrase, our experience of the spiritual is always mediated through the material. We sense the presence of a dead relative as a shiver in our bodies, or we swell with celestial well-being while listening to a beautiful piece of music. Religion, Orsi says, is the practice of making the invisible visible, of concretizing the order of the universe. In other words, the only way we can understand life's mysteries is through the physical world. We make pictures of God. We speak in tongues. We hear voices from beyond. We talk to our ancestors. Religion is the act of transforming abstract mysteries into material realities. This definition of religion cracked open something inside me. I don't go to church on Sunday or imagine an afterlife. I'm pretty certain that when I take my last breath, whatever it is that makes me me will dissipate, and that my life has no particular meaning except that I like living it. But Orsi's definition suggests that I've been religious all along. When I wear the silver bracelets that clanked when my paternal grandmother came into the room, I am communicating with the dead. When I fill my maternal grandmother's milk glass chicken with pink and white mints like she did, I am honoring the dead. Orsi calls these manifestations of the world beyond the material bearers of sacred presence. Reading my dad's book made me realize that I respond deeply to certain objects, and not only to those associated with my biological ancestors. My pink paperback copy of Trout Fishing in America is a bearer of sacred presence, and I invest it with a meaning that is beyond its material reality. It is the wafer of my communion. On that beautiful day in September, when Arlene and I found the campsite where Brodigan and his family stayed, and I read aloud from Trout Fishing in America, I was engaged in what my father calls one of those small world-building activities, invoking a relationship with whatever cosmic realms and agencies we presuppose, authenticating realities that are imaginatively real. At Little Redfish Lake, I was imagining in great detail the writer and his scenes of inspiration. My religious inclinations, it turns out, go beyond collecting meaningful objects. I will drive 600 miles to touch the earth trod by a writer. Now, the trip and its significance came into focus. I'd gone to Idaho to invoke a relationship with ancestors, both biological and literary. The moments at Big Redfish Lake and at the campsite felt transcendent because they were transcendent. The word Eucharist from Greek means thanksgiving, and my journey was a way of giving thanks.
That was beautiful. You know, as a person who grew up with, classmates who were obsessed by Brodigan, I've always thought that. And hearing you talk about, especially I love, paraphrasing, your father paraphrasing, I think I had one of those experiences where suddenly I was transported to being across a table I don't know if you were there, but I know Jennifer was there with Waverly Fitzgerald drinking Moscow Mules. And I had never seen anyone drink a Moscow Mule before. And I'm like a little like freaked out because it's like, do all restaurants or bars, do they have to order those special like copper little weird things? So just you're talking about objects, and that ordinariness just kind of even took me to that. So thank you so much for being here with us tonight. You may not think yourself brave, but you are. And I can tell that tomorrow is going to be an amazing, amazing event. So, I mean, when Dr. Death dies and his memorial is live streamed from St. Mark's, I mean, that's big. So, best to you tomorrow. Taking a breath. Okay. So, I'm now switching gears. If anybody would like to let me know about reading, doing open mic, 3-minute open mic, let me know in the chat. Now we're moving, and if you're just joining us, it's I feel like I'm on radio. It's the number 378. It's About Time Writers Reading Series. We are a partner with the Seattle Public Library, and we now keep the events. Oh, great. Sandy says she'll read. Good. We tape the events, and they're available later on YouTube and also as a podcast on the Seattle Public Library site. So the pandemic has brought some blessings. I always wish that more people could be privy to the magic of the readings on Thursday nights without battling traffic and parking. And that has come true. So, Sylvia. Sylvia and I first met at Cancer Lifeline. It was my good fortune that she came back from an experience, I believe, in Antarctica, ready to write after a life that had already been amazingly rich and full. And I had the good fortune to be having her across the table from me. Sylvia was raised in a music-loving family in Batavia, New York. In the wake of Sputnik, she chose to study science. She earned a BA in zoology from Syracuse University, a PhD in developmental biology from the University of Pennsylvania, and an MA in psychology from Antioch University, Seattle. She is research professor emeritus after a long career in cancer research at the University of Washington. Oh, good, she's got the story here. Following a trip to Antarctica in 2007, Sylvia began to focus on poetry. Her poems appeared in Floating Bridge Review, Crab Creek Review, Clover, and Antiphon, among other print and online journals. She is a 2-time Pushcart nominee, won the 2013 Masons Road Winter Literary Award, was a 2019 Jack Star Writer, and will be a 2021 Mineral School resident. Her first collection, Risking It, was just published by Red Mountain Press, and she has launched an eponymous website, which is quite lovely. It is my pleasure to call her a friend and to have been present at the birth of some of her writing, Sylvia Pollack.
Peggy, thank you so much. As always, it's a pleasure to be here. It's about time, but Peggy has really played a major role in my writing life. Many of the poems in Risking It got their start with a Peggy-led writing session, either at Cancer Lifeline or at the project at Sunset Hill. And Peggy has, as I'm sure all of you know, this unparalleled ability to inspire and encourage people to find their voice. And I can't thank her enough. So the last time I read it, It's About Time, was in March of 2019, and I read a series of Deaf Woman poems. And I'll start there tonight, but then I'll move on to give you a taste of what all else is in here. So we're going to begin with a prayer. You know, we've just been talking about, Allison was talking about important things about what spirituality is. So here's a prayer. Prayer falling on deaf ears. Dear God, please send a decoder, an angel with mellifluous voice to perch in the rim of my ear. Make her multi-armed so she can catch, parse, and juggle the staccato bursts of racket, soaring sibilants that pass for human speech. Let her have a device to analyze the incoming cacophony, assemble syllables, give her an algorithm to detect possible words in English, try them out for meaning in the context of a rapid conversation. What I'm saying, God, is that she must be fast, perceptive, imaginative, and indefatigable. Try her out on those words. If you can't detail an angel to me, perhaps you can put video displays on the forehead of each person I meet. Like super titles at the opera, their words will scroll gently across, driving the wrinkles. If you'll do this, I promise to stop nodding inanely, laughing or looking serious at the wrong time. I will be a credit to your handiwork. If you decide to answer me, God, please stand squarely in front of me. Let me see your lips when you speak. Well, the deaf woman. How the deaf woman hears. The deaf woman hears with heart, intuition, curiosity. Conversation is improv. She hears a word or two thrown into the room by some unidentifiable voice. That becomes the nidus, focus, center, around which a sentence crystallizes in her mind. This is called fill in the blanks. This is called hangman's noose. The rules are constructed of jello, overcooked spaghetti, flexible, open to interpretation and interruption. The deaf woman invents continuity, acts as if she understands. This is a ruse, sham, subterfuge, trick, wile, con. It is exhausting. The exhausted deaf woman tries to comprehend, grasp what is said, follow the thread of conversation. She's heard this can lead to depression. Ah, yes, that old why bother feeling, huh? Ever hear wolves? The why bother bug is virulent this dark time of year. It passes the blood-brain barrier, latches onto receptors for dopamine and oxytocin, blocks feelings of reward, of love. Why bother is mediated by cytokines and funhouse mirrors, distorting what is. Goldilocks porridge is lumpy and cold. The wolf's teeth fall out. Jack and Jill enlisted, went off to kill foreigners. Little Bo Peep's flock was rendered redundant by tofu and seitan. In Mexico, caravans of blind mice marched north toward the border, striking terror in elephants. You're not asking for advice, but I'd just like to point out, this will be your 80th February. It always gets better. Well, meditating helps, and here's some meditation instructions in 3 parts. 1, chant home, 1 hummable syllable. Make accords with the relatives, breathing in, breathing out. Everything is here: anger, fear, love, ennui. A cat prowls beneath the bedroom window, crooning like a Tuvan, under and overtones bridging the gap between species. 2, concoct a soup from chicken bones, parsnips, garlic, and cayenne. Pharmacopoeia for the soul, Om remedy for the deep ache, the loneliness of sentience, of being in a body and at sea. 3, home is the sailor humming a shanty, the words risque. It's all a risk anyway. Opening the lips to kiss or sing lets microbes in. Resistance is futile. If the cat has your tongue, let her keep it. hum along. This is Letitia's lost balloon. She attempts to meditate, breathes in, breathes out, watches her breath, feeling her abdomen rise and fall. Then she remembers the shattered dining room fixture. Jagged edges of thought slice the narrow cord of her attention. Her focus floats away, untethered balloon. She blows up another, breathes in and out. This time, 2 cycles. Then the car intrudes. When can she get that hanging side mirror fixed? She recommits to the breath, to the act of meditating, but on the next exhale, it's gone. Come back, she calls to the minuscule balloon. Did you fail lithium, or did it fail you? Tiny elemental socket wrenches do a turn, sometimes for the good, sometimes not. Beleaguered synapses borrow transmitters, send frantic SOS signals. No one's receiving. Meanwhile, there's a longing for some semblance of sanity. All the marbles cinched safely in a small hand-woven bag, none rolled under the sofa or used as ball bearings in a Rube Goldberg contraption. Invention is necessity's stepdaughter, waiting for her chance to step out, step up, into a waiting pumpkin. When the wheels come off, and they will, lithium works frantically to right the carriage. The inevitable ditch into which everything falls is filled with dank water, toads, milfoil. Word is sent for some desiccant. Word is sent for a sump pump. Word returns empty-handed. Yeah, some words don't seem very useful, but some are beautiful. The next poem is an Obad, a morning poem, actually written with a group of Peggy's project at Sunset Hill writers over there at Iron Springs. And for those of you who don't know where Iron Springs is, it's on the Olympic Peninsula right on the Pacific coast. Beyond the surf, the water flattens. Poker-faced Pacific holds all the cards, deals them when she chooses. In our cabin, perched on a high bluff, the alarm clock jangles at first light. Nobody said it. No one wants to be reminded of time, yet the tide insists. In and out, mood rises and falls, strews flotsam and jetsam, such beautiful words for debris. Long ago at Iron Springs, despair wrestled with hope in a rundown cabin. Everything's refurbished now. This morning, twisted pines on the cliff, welcome housekeeper winds, tidying these early hours into a new day. The Hero's Journey. The Hero's Journey is now available as a package tour, sponsored by ARP and your alumni association. It begins with a wide circle out from home base, through wild mountains and their dubious inhabitants, Sasquatch, Yeti, Samavili, Shanhu, through desiccated deserts, random encounters with camel-riding Bedouin, small oases, brilliant rocks. Then onward through snake-infested jungles, where scampering monkeys taunt bright-costumed tourists, snatching water bottles, biting them open. Until at last, somewhere in the Southern Ocean, drifting dangerously close to Antarctica, a hurricane carelessly tosses your cruise ship from crest to trough of 30-foot waves. Over the PA system, the Russian captain intones, "Do not worry, she is strong ship." Confined to your cabin, fed by a crew member tossing sandwiches from the doorway, you ride the storm, take videos through a rollicking porthole. You will show those left at home the fury and sound. You come safely to harbor at the tip of a continent that's drifting at the same rate your fingernails grow. The lack of a manifest seems destined. You have only today this shirt that's your favorite. I have two more poems. Intervention has an epigraph by Eric Pankey. He says, like everyone else, I am waiting for death to intervene. Intervention, what'll it be? Should I choose the oft-invoked delivery truck, laden with prime merchandise, rushing to make a delivery, smacking me sunny side up, blood smeared like hot sauce? Or pick an airliner drifting slowly off course, disappearing from radar until months later, small chunks of wreckage wash up on atolls, my fish already fish food, my bones scattered. Perhaps a more gradual exit is preferable, dwindling into incontinence, oblivion, body and mind reduced, paltry vestiges. Would it be better to surrender to a saber-toothed tiger, busily shredding bodies, culling the weak, or be sold into slavery to that cruel mistress, cancer? I'm not brave enough to saunter in front of tiger or truck. When the slaver beckoned, I ran like the devil. For 20 window to see what comes down the road for me. Circling over my house are raptors and delivery drones. One has a package for me. And I just want to thank you all for being here tonight, and Lily and Allison, and this has just been wonderful. So I'm going to end with Facing Sunset. Facing sunset is different, of course, from gazing at brilliant tropical mornings with colors of mangoes and berries streaking the sky, or tracking the gradual rollback of fog, mist burning off as the sun works its way down to the northwest coast. No, this is more relinquishing, letting go of the rheostat, no longer trying to control the light or the dark. Just letting it happen, slow degree by degree, the shifting of colors and focus, the lovely word dusk, painting the undersides of cumulus clouds, the final flare of color and light as the sun dips into the sea, where today is extinguished, memories allied, and night's mystery floats like a hand-carved bentwood box, waiting to be opened. Thank you.
Thank you, Sylvia. You're way too kind to me. It's you can imagine what it was like, and I see many of my Cancer Lifeline writers and friends here. To suddenly, have Sylvia sitting across the table, just, and like we sort of joke that she's like almost dangerous. She's so weirdly good. She could bring the smell of onions into the room when she sauteed them. And I also wanted to follow up, Allison, you said that you had never read on Zoom before, but you taught. You're an excellent reader on Zoom. You're all excellent readers tonight. It's such a delight. And it's such a pleasure for me to hear new works, and also like Sylvia's works. I realized that because I have seen some of those poems and heard them, and you can also hear Elizabeth Austin, if you probably go through the archives, interview and talk to Sylvia about her poem, the particular Deaf Woman poem that she started by reading. It's almost like the more you read them over, for works I'm familiar with, the more I love them. They become like cherished photographs. They become like the ones that you just go to over and over again. So every time I hear it, it strikes some chord that's already familiar in my body. I just love them. So I'm happy to say that also Sandra Yanone has said she will do the open mic. So Here's our other internet star, the woman who, through Cultivating Voices Live, has just kept us all going for the last year. Sandra, are you still there? Unmute.
I am.
Sandra has a footnote
Thank-
on her name now as the last writer's craft person to present
Thank you.
for the pandemic. Yeah, it's going to be a footnote forever.
Yeah, I'm very, very happy to have that badge. I remember
Burned
that
it.
night so well because it was one of the last times that I did anything in person either. So, well, I've got one poem for y'all tonight, and I just want to say that Allison and I went to graduate school together. And so I have a long history with Allison. And, I'm sending a lot of love to you and your family. And I want to this wacky little poem for you tonight that ironically was published today in Swim Every Day. It was the featured poem. We have a little known fact that if you ever need a tour in Minneapolis of Mary Tyler Moore's old haunts, call up Allison Green because she will give a killer tour of Minneapolis and the Mary Tyler Moore show. Well, in that vein, I'm going to read a poem about one of my idols from childhood, David Cassidy. So here it is. And I should also say Sylvia and I are in Poets on the Coast together. And so we're sisters, Poets on the Coast sisters. And I always love to hear you read, and going to be booking you for a reading with us on Cultivating Voices. So this was a poem that I wrote with Poets on the Coast last September, started there. It's called David Cassidy Writes Me a Fan Letter from the Great Painted Bus Beyond. Okay, here we go. Fan letter from the Great Painted Bus Beyond. From the pages of all those Tiger Beat magazines you purchased with your allowance, I became more like sugar with each poster you pulled from the centerfold's staples. I never liked that my crotch was always pinned to the crease, that girls tugged at my sleeves, ripped off my clothes, and shredded what was left of me at my concerts. I was hoping to be a firefly that feasted on night flowers, leaving my scent behind with my original songs, the ones no one heard over the din of those pop hits that ABC's money moguls shoveled into my mouth. During box lunches on the set, I had to sign thousands of postcards to girls I'd never met. I was drowning, Sandy, in the fountain of teen idol fame, and I didn't know how to swim. Who does in that kind of water? I became a paper ghost, and only the drugs and sex told me I was alive. What can I say? Why am I risking this from better than all the lyrics to I Think I Love You? Every poem is a spotlight that shines the light back into your eyes. You need to keep them open to honest desires. Don't get caught underneath the undertow of the trapdoor's weight. Come on, you know how to escape, to get happy. You almost do it every day, except you act like it's your shadow side. You never let yourself fully embrace those albums that I know you still sing when you are alone or driving with your sister in her van. I know you gave a private concert to Tara Hardy in your living room, that you have 2 microphones at the ready to practice when you feel inspired by my lips open to songs you wore down the needles on your record player to hear over and over again. I wasn't ready for everything that came next after the gold records and the show's opening credits dressed in mod. I should have shaken off that Partridge Family tree sooner. But this isn't my ending. This is your beginning. So come on, stay happy, swallow my songs, my prayers for that girl long ago who loved me as no one could. Retire all those faded fan magazines. You know you are happier when you are unlocked from inside the glass house where you've been waiting your whole life to sing. Thanks for putting up with me tonight, everybody. And I'm going to put in the chat, we have a really special reading coming up on Sunday called Witness, a Conversation in Poetry with 3 generations of Asian American women poets, Janet Miratakani, Mary Awishi, and Tanya Kohong on Sunday. And I look forward to seeing y'all soon. Be well.
Thank you. And, you said about get rid of those fan magazines, but you held up a fan magazine.
It's actually the record album.
Okay. I was going to say, otherwise we've still got it.
I have the lunchbox. I have the thermos. I have the trading cards still. I have a David Cassidy jigsaw puzzle. All of it.
I can't remember. Is he still alive?
No, that's why the fan letters from the Great Painted Bus Beyond.
Oh, Beyond.
Yeah, Beyond. Yeah.
I have trouble keeping track. Okay.
No worries. Thank you.
Thank you. It's every Sunday is another amazing day. So.
Thanks, Peggy. Appreciate it.
Okay. So, did anybody else want to do open mic? You can give me a little wave. I haven't heard from anybody else. So at this point, what I will do, unless anybody else wants to join us, is I'm going to stop the recording, and everybody is welcome to chit chat and catch up. It has been a wonderful evening. I say that every time, but there's always a special magic, and it's never the same. There really has been a way of feeling connected in a different way since we went online, and also being able to see so many people that wouldn't have been able to come, and also sometimes to hear them better. In the library, there's always people coming and going, or somebody fighting outside, or leaving the door open. So I can really hear you, and that is delightful. And it's so wonderful to have so many groups that we're crossing over and reconnecting tonight, friends and family, many writing groups. So I hope we'll see you next month, and good night.